Hello from Portland, Oregon, everybody. This is our January advocacy webinar distributed by Compassion International. I'm Ian Durius, and our focus tonight is developing a relationship with your sponsored child. In a moment, I'll introduce tonight's speaker, but first, a couple of housekeeping items. Although there are a couple of hundred of you on here and you're all on mute, you're welcome to ask questions at any time. So just type it into the question box in your control panel and we'll answer questions as we go along. And if we're not able to get to your questions, we'll make sure we address it in an email we send out after the webinar. Also, many of you were invited to this presentation by friends and family in Compassion International's Advocate Network. So at the close of this webinar, I'll share a little more about the network and invite you to join us. Now, on to our speaker. Tonight, we have with us Kim Hall. Kim lives in Hampton, Georgia with her husband and kids and is an advocate for children. As she speaks tonight, I think you'll hear her love for God and His precious children. And it's because these are God's precious children that we want to help you develop your relationship with your sponsored children. So Kim, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Hey, hi, everyone. As Ian said, my name is Kim Hall, and I live in Hampton, Georgia, and I'm a mom and a high school teacher, and I'm a sponsor and correspondent with Compassion. And I wanted to share those things with you as a preface to this conversation about writing to our children, because being a mom of a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old, being a high school teacher to 40-something students and being a correspondent to the number of children that we are, I totally understand that life is so busy. And what I want you to get out of this presentation that we're going to be going through tonight is that letter writing is doable for anyone. I don't want you guys to feel overwhelmed. I know how it is. There was a time when I absolutely never wrote to my children. I think it really became important for me, actually, when I first decided to go and visit the first child that we sponsored as a family. His name's Jeffrey, and he lives in the Dominican Republic. And as I was preparing to go, I started thinking, oh my goodness, what do I really know about this child? We've been sponsoring him for going on 5 years, and I went back to think, and I realized, you know, I maybe have only written him like 4 letters. So before the trip, I started like writing like a crazy person, just to try to get some letters in there before my visit. So this information that you're getting is coming from a person who really struggled with letter writing at the beginning. The info that you're going to receive tonight has really been coming to me as a part of a journey of learning. A lot of it came from just trying things and making mistakes. And a lot of it I've learned from other advocates and sponsors who have really helped me with this. So I want you to be encouraged to take this information and really try not to feel too overwhelmed. This process of developing a relationship with your child is part of your journey. And what I want you to do before we even start is to think back to the time when you first sponsored a child or first began corresponding with a child through Compassion. And I know that when you either browsed on the website or you walked up to the Compassion sponsorship table, I know it probably wasn't on your mind, oh, I just really want to give away my money now. I'm pretty sure for most of us, our desire was to build a relationship with a child, to connect with a child, to pour the love of Christ into a life, and to remind that child living in poverty of their worth and their value. And I want you to understand that this relationship that you're building with this child, the thing that you wanted in the very beginning, is based on communication. Us writing letters letters, that's our link to grow this relationship. And in this way, when we write these letters, I really feel like our sponsorship, our giving, will really grow into ministry. And this ministry is absolutely incredibly valuable. I want to take us where I think we should always start with our conversations to something that Jesus said. So I'm going to flip to the next slide, and I'm going to give everyone just a second to read Luke 9, verses 47 and 48. Jesus was talking to his disciples, and he said, "Whoever welcomes this little child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me." And I think we can all think back to the story of the time when Jesus took a little child and put him in his lap, and it's just a precious image of Christ. And then he said these words to his disciples. And really what he was saying in these words is that when you get to know a little child, you're getting to know his heart. You're getting to know the heart of Christ. If you think about it, from a child we can look at them and we can learn how to approach Christ, approaching him with the curiosity of a child, the enthusiasm of a child, the trust of a child. Just for those of you who've received letters from your kids, your Compassion kids, just that not being afraid to ask questions, sometimes silly questions, but questions that they want the answers to. And then just that simple love and that simple adoration. We can learn all of this from our sponsored children. This is incredibly valuable, not just to the children, but to us as well. And then there's another verse that I would like to point you to, and that's in Matthew chapter 6, verses 20 to 21. I kind of prefaced our whole conversation tonight by saying that life is busy. We all fill a lot of roles in our lives. We all have jobs. We all have places where we serve, where we may be parents, we're sons, daughters, all of that. Our life is busy. But I want us to understand, before we even talk about how to get started with letter writing, what to write about, I want you to understand that absolutely no time, effort, prayer, or love that you pour into the life of your sponsored child is ever wasted. This verse says, "Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Jesus again was having a conversation with his disciples, and he was telling them about the futility of storing up treasures here on earth, because a thief can break in and steal, or they can just break down and fall apart. But he told them to store up for themselves something that would last forever, something in heaven. And I got to thinking about this one time. And I was just thinking, okay, God, you want me to store up something that's going to last forever. What is that? And the answer that I came up with is the only thing that I know of that we actually see every single day that's going to last forever is people. The life of a person is going to last forever. So when you invest in someone, whether it's the life of a child who lives 1,000 miles away, 2,000 miles away, the other side of the world, when you do that, you're making an investment that's going to last forever. So that's just an encouragement to you. I mean, honestly, what a privilege to get to do that. No time, no effort, no prayer, no love that you pour into this precious child is going to be wasted. So with all that being said, I just wanted to give you some encouragement as we step into all the practical details of getting this journey for you started. So I'm going to start at the very beginning, the practical steps to getting to know your sponsored child. Where I want to start is getting to know your sponsored child's culture, community, and country. Every one of our children comes from a very unique background. They're a product of their culture, whether we realize that or not, a product of their community, a product of their country. And Compassion has already equipped us with some awesome tools to get to know that. On the next slide, hoping you can see that now, you can take a look. There are 3 different links that I've listed that are available to you as a sponsor to find out more information about your sponsored child. The first link is the link to compassion.com. When you go onto compassion.com, at the top of the screen there are lots of different tabs for you to look at. And the tab that I'd like to direct your attention to when you go on later is the Where We Work tab. And this is where you're going to find information about your child's specific country. Compassion works in 26 countries, and they are all very, very different. So it's really interesting to go on there and find out what you can about your child's country and the unique culture that they come from. The next link that I provided for you is a link to ourcompassion.org. And what Our Compassion is, it's really actually incredible, and I was only introduced to it about a year ago. It's actually a social network, it's actually a social network that was created by Compassion for sponsors. And you can go in and you can set up an account for yourself. And actually all of your sponsored children will appear on your account, along with links to project groups, links to other sponsors who sponsor at that same center. And it also has a huge database of information about your child's community, even down to letters that your child's pastor has written. As you know, Compassion works through the local church. So each child is going to have a pastor there that oversees the work that's being done in connection with the project out of that church. In a moment, I'm going to tell you how to find your child's center on Our Compassion by just entering the project number. And that can be really helpful. I've really enjoyed reading my children's pastor letter because you really get a vision for what it is that is being done in the community. You get introduced to the specific struggles that community faces, a little bit of the history even that has gone on in that community that's affected how your child was raised and kind of the things that they think about on a daily basis. One of the letters that I got to read was from one of my children in Rwanda, and the pastor was talking about how the community still struggles with the effects of the Rwandan genocide. And I was like, wow, I would never even have thought about that. I wouldn't have thought about how, I guess at this time, almost, 10 years later, 20 years later going on, that people would still be affected by that. So it really made me think about that. So it's really cool to see those kinds of things. So I'll help you know how to find that in just a moment. The last link on this page is for Compassion's blog. And I love this because you can go in and there's a search bar and you can find inspiring stories from everywhere Compassion works. That's not the only things that are available on Compassion's blog. They also have letter writing tips and just a lot of really neat things. But for me, it's been amazing to get to go on and just type in, for example, Honduras or even a specific area in a country. And lots of stories come up. They're really encouraging and affirming to you as a sponsor, so I would encourage you to check that out. All right, the next step that we're going to take together is to learn to know your sponsored child's personal information. When you first sponsored your child, there were numbers on that child's packet. We're going to get to what all those numbers mean in just a moment. But after you sponsored your child in the mail, you probably received a packet of information, and it gave you steps to be able to set up an account on Compassion.com. And since all of you are on here tonight, I know that you have internet access. So if any of you have not done that already, that is a great step for you to take. Go online and just create an account using your sponsor ID. When you do that, you will have your account online where you're able to see it. It's under the My Account tab on Compassion.com, and you can use this feature to access all the current information about each of your sponsored children. I'm going to skip down actually to the last point. Your child's information and photo will be updated every 2 years. So really, all the current information about your child is right at your fingertips online. Your child's birthday, all their hobbies and interests. You know, when we first get that packet, like you can see on the slide, I have a picture of one of our sponsored children. That's Luz Maria in Honduras. And we sponsored her when she was 10. Just absolutely precious with her pigtails and her hands on her hips. And at that time, Luz Maria liked to play with dolls and jump rope. But as you can see from the next picture, Luz Maria's grown up a little bit. She's 15 years old now, and her hobbies and interests have changed. So instead of playing with dolls now, she plays soccer. So you'll see information like that update every 2 years, and it's just amazing to get to watch the children grow. Also available to you for each child is your child's project information, information about their family, including how many siblings they might have, if their parents are married, unmarried, separated, if they have both parents, just all kinds of information like that. And if there are any further questions that you have about your child in particular, you can call Compassion and ask questions. This has been really helpful to me. You can ask about sponsorship history. A lot of the children that we've sponsored or correspond with have had sponsors before we were their sponsor. So sometimes I've called to ask, okay, this child, he's 15. Did this child have a sponsor before? Obviously, yes. If he's 15, he has. But did this child receive letters? And going into it, if you have a child who's never received a letter before in their life, that tells you that it might be a little slow to start a relationship with that child. Maybe it'll take a little more prayer. Maybe it'll take a little more encouragement and love and just being really faithful and sending letters to that child before you'll see that relationship grow. Another super thing that I really like is that you can request past photos of your sponsored child, and that's always precious. You know, if you have a child that's 8 or 9, to go back and get a picture of them when they were 5 or 6, I just like to do that. So that's something that you can definitely call Compassion about and ask. All right, let's move on to the next slide, and this one is, do you know your numbers? There are 2 numbers that as a sponsor you need to be familiar with as you're starting to correspond. The first number that you need to be familiar with is your sponsor donor ID number. This is a 7-digit number. I provided an example for you, 3149132, and this is your unique code as a sponsor and donor. This is what you use to set up your online account. And it's really important for you to know this number, because anytime you call Compassion, they are going to ask for this Need It to make changes to your account, and you also need it for correspondence. Every letter that you write needs to have your sponsor donor ID. This number and your child's ID number are what ensure that your child is getting your letter. Your child's ID is also 7 digits preceded by 2 letters. For example, HO1330319. As you can probably guess, the first 2 letters are the code for what country your child lives in. For example, HO is Honduras. Your child's project number is the first 2 letters followed by the first 3 numbers. For example, the little girl that you see in the picture, her name is Jessarella, and she attends the project HO133. That's the number given to her project in Honduras. So that makes sure that your letter is, first of all, directed to the correct project within your child's country. The last 4 digits of that long number with the letters in it, those are actually your child's specific number. So once the letter gets to the project, you need to make sure that the letter gets to your child, and that's what the last 4 digits are. So for example, 0319, that is the child's specific number at the project. So again, like I said, these numbers are needed to make changes to your account, and they're needed for correspondence. So I'm going to pause right there. Ian, do we have any questions so far?
I'm glad you asked, Kim. We've had some questions come in, so keep them coming. The questions were more related to the actual webinar and kind of working the control panel. So audience, keep those questions coming. If you have any questions for Kim, they're more than welcome. But for now, Kim, we can keep moving on.
All right, so now we're going to move on to actually building a relationship through letters. Sometimes you might wonder, okay, when I do write my letters, do they get there? Well, this picture is one of the favorite pictures I've ever taken. This is our sponsored child, Luz Maria, and this photo is actually taken in her bedroom at her home. And you can look at the photo, and you can see that she's holding a folder full of the letters that we've sent her. You can actually see pictures of me and my husband and my 3 children right there on one of those letters. And so I just love that photo. I love showing that to people so they can realize that, yes, your letters get there. I'm going to talk to you right now about when you should write to your sponsored child. There are 2 ways that you can write, that you can start this relationship through letters. The first way is the old-fashioned way, and I have to say I love this way. You can write on paper. A question that I get a lot when I'm talking to sponsors is, well, do I have to wait until I receive a letter from my child to write? Because as you know, if you've received a letter from your child, it always comes with stationery for you to respond to your child. But you don't have to wait to receive that to write to your child. You can write anytime on paper. You can actually print your own stationery. After this webinar is over, I've put together a big packet of information for you to use. It's not really information, it's tips and even templates. I've included a template that you can use in Microsoft Word that you can print on just any kind of paper that you have to make your own stationery. And that kind of varies it up so the letters look different and very unique for you. The only thing that you need to remember anytime you write to your child on paper is that you include your name, your sponsor ID, your child's name, and your child's number. That is very important to make sure that letter gets to your child. Another way that you can write to your sponsored child is online. You can log in to your My Account on Compassion.com. and you can click the option Write My Child, and it's very simple to do that. You can choose from lots of different templates. The great thing about writing online, you don't have to worry about including your name and number and your child's name and number, because that's all done for you. Basically, you choose a template, you write your letter, you can upload photos, and then you're done. You can click Send to My Child. And one of the things that's great for those of you that have multiple children about writing online is that Compassion gives you the option, once you have written a letter, to copy that draft for another child. You can actually go in and just change the name, change any other little details in there that you want to, and forward that to your other children. So that's a great time-saving tool for you as you write to your children. As far as how often should you write on paper and how often should you write online, I think that's really unique for you. Do what works. You know, if all you can accomplish some days is to write online, that is absolutely fabulous. But if sometimes you have a minute and you can sit down and jot something down on paper for your child, I know that that's meaningful as well, for them to get your handwriting on that paper. As for me, I write once a month to our sponsored children, and usually about every other month I try to write on paper and then include some little goodies for my children. And then occasionally, you know, every other month I'll write online as well. So do what works for you. The important part is just write something, and Compassion makes it so easy with writing online to getting on there and just getting something out there to your children. And the kids love the photos, so it's really a great tool for us. The next step that I'm going to introduce to you as we're talking about writing to our children is a way for you to get organized. When I first started writing to my children, this became absolutely essential. When I sit down to write, I like to have everything in front of me. And like I said, with life being busy, this just makes things so much easier. If you get these tools and start using them, I think letter writing is going to be really doable for you. What I did at first was I created a sponsor's notebook. I made a home for my letters. These letters are treasures. I visited several of my children, and every time they pull out their letters, it's a treasure for them. They take very good care of these letters, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not doing this. I need to make sure that their letters are as precious to me as my letters are to them. So I made a notebook, and I put all my different children, I put their letters in this notebook. And really it accomplished several things. It made a record of our correspondence to one another. I have all their letters there in the order of when they wrote them, so I can see how they've grown, what they've gone through, what they've requested prayer for. So that was accomplished, but also it's a great conversation starter for friends and family. It's great for your coffee table. It's great advocates if you ever go to an event to have that just right out on the table so that sponsors can see this is what your correspondence is going to look like. I made a list for you of supplies that you'll need to do this, and again, you should definitely do what works for you. This is just a suggestion. You should get a 3-ring binder and size it according to the number of sponsored children that you have. You need a divider, one for each of your children. You need some sheet protectors to stick your letters down in there to keep them safe. And then also you need photos of your sponsored child if you want to include those on there. And of course, for your notebook, you're going to need the letters from your sponsored child. When I first did this, I feel awful. I had to go back and dig in my coffee table to find some of the letters that my kids wrote to me. So that's what you're going to need to set up your notebook. The next step that I recommend is to just stick a paper folder in the back of your notebook. Just a paper folder, anything that works for you, so that everything is together when you sit down to do a handwritten letter for your child. You should include in that stationery, whether it's what you've printed yourself. If you look over to the side, that's an example of the template that you're going to receive after this webinar. And that's just stationery that I've printed myself. You can see on one side there's my letter, and on the other side there's space for translation. That's really helpful. Another thing that I love, it's my favorite thing that I use, is address labels. In a minute, we're going to get to a slide where I can show you how you can send all kinds of really neat things to your sponsored children. And I use address labels where I've printed on there my name, my sponsor number, my child's name, and my child's number, so that I can just stick them on the letter when I'm ready to send it, and also stick it on anything that I send. So it's just right there on a sheet. I can peel the label and stick it on there. I don't have to go look up those numbers when I need them. Another thing that you're going to receive after the webinar is a correspondence record sheet. For me, I'm really forgetful, and so it's helpful to me to have a sheet where I write down when my child wrote me a letter, when I responded to that letter, and also a little bit about what I said and what my child may have said in their letter. I also write on that sheet any extras that I sent my child to make sure that I don't send them twice, although I'm sure the kids wouldn't mind getting a coloring book twice. I try to do that so that I can vary it up. Also, in your correspondence folder, you should include some envelopes. If you want to go ahead and pre-print those, you can. In just a moment, I'm going to show you the address where you should send all of your letters. So we'll get to that slide in just a moment. So the next step is super fun. This is one of the things that I really struggled with when I was first starting letters. I wanted to send, of course, my child tons of things. I wanted to send them clothes and like a soccer ball and a bicycle and everything, and that totally doesn't work out, just for customs and all of that. Compassion has rules for what we can send our children, and they have to be paper or bendable cardboard. So that kind of took out the soccer ball and the clothes and all of that. But I learned that you can still have a lot of fun with paper items. The thing that really blew my mind to begin with is that our letters to our children don't have to fit in a regular sized envelope. We can send in large manila envelopes for our sponsored children as long as they're less than 1/4 of an inch thick. Every item that we send has to be paper or bendable cardboard that is less than 1/4 of an inch thick. And I've provided for you kind of like my cheat sheet of items to send to your sponsored children. I've divided it up by age and by gender. So you can feel free to look at that. And they're just suggestions of all kinds of fun things that you can send. If you look at the photo, you can see just in my box, I made a box for myself so that every time I'm ready to write, I can just grab something. You can send sticker books, you can send playing cards, you can send 3D puzzles, you can send jigsaw puzzles, you can send masks, you can send like 3D pop-up doll houses, origami, paint with water as long as the paintbrushes are not in there. Just so many fun things. And like I said, I provided that list for you, and you'll get that after the webinar. Remember that every item you send should be labeled with your sponsorship information. Create those labels again to save time for yourself. All right, next slide. Just go ahead and memorize this address. Where does your mail go? In the United States, all of your mail should go to Compassion International, Attention Child Correspondence Department, Colorado Springs, Colorado 80997. Makes it super easy. I also want to address while I'm here something that I learned. If you have multiple children, you can include all of your letters in one envelope. Just make sure you staple whatever is meant for each child to that child's letter. And that it's labeled with the correct numbers. You can, if you have a a large things to send. You can put it in a flat rate box and send it, or just put it in a large envelope. It all goes to the same place, and they'll sort it out at Compassion. So I'm going to stop right here and take a breath for a minute. Ian, do we have any questions?
Yes, thanks so much for opening this up, Kim. And yeah, we'll let you take a breath. This is all great information and a lot of great questions coming in. The first one, Elijah is asking if we can send silly bands. And I've never sent them, but I think you can because they're just thin enough, wouldn't you say?
Well, actually, this is one of those trial and error things that I've tried. I tried to send them, and I was not able to send them. It has to do with the material that they're made out of, actually, and though they are super cool, and I would really like to send them, I think it's a no.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then Anna had a couple of quick questions. Her sponsor child is only 4. So she's asking if they read their letters, and I think that's an easy one. Yes, they read their letters, probably from one of the student center workers, and then probably again and again by parents or other relatives that know how to read. But then also, what ideas, Kim, do you have to engage a 4-year-old? And in Anna's case, it's a 4-year-old little girl.
Oh, wow. Yeah, they're so precious when they're small. And I'm a mom of a 4 and 5 and 7-year-olds, so I'm just kind of getting out of that toddler stage. And like I said, I have a 4-year-old, so I try to think about things that are going to be interesting to them. In a minute, we're going to go through a ton of ideas for what you can write to your children or about. But I like to write to them about things like, let's see, I actually have a little boy who's young in India that we write to, and I started thinking, what is a 4-year-old boy like? Well, boys like insects and airplanes and animals and things like that. So I write about those kind of things. And one thing that I do for younger children, I don't make my letters so very long. Usually on the template that I have, I skip lines and leave some space in between, so it's not so much for a little one to remember and not so many questions for them to have to answer. Maybe 1 or 2 questions that they can answer quickly. And another thing that's absolutely fabulous, maybe your child can't write their own letter. Their project director or their tutor is going to write for them. Even their parents might write for them. Ask them to write you a picture. Send them pictures that you draw yourself. Trace your hand on a piece of paper and ask them to send a tracing of their hand back to you. That's been one of my favorite things, is to get back tracings of their hands or their fingerprints. So something that they can do, and they can feel like they're having input on their letter even before they're able to write it. So great question there.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. Also, William has a question related to the content of the letters. He said that sometimes his kids ask him the same questions that perhaps came from a prior letter. What are your thoughts on that? What's your experience there?
Yeah, it happens to me too. Yeah, I think some of the problems it's not really a problem. I think sometimes just the time between us writing the letter and them getting it, and it can take 2 to 3 months for our children to receive our letters after they've been translated, and then just getting them to where they live. So sometimes that can be a little bit confusing. But if you really want to make sure that your child knows the answer to that question that they've asked several times, be sure to highlight it. I'm going to talk about that later. That really draws attention to that question or to the answer to that question for your child. Or specifically say in your letter, I want to answer your questions now, and then write out a little bit of the question. The answer to this question is this. So you can try those things and see if that improves for you.
Very good. Very good. And just one other question, Kim, and then we'll let you move on. Let's see here. I'm going to scroll back up to it. Related to how long it takes for, Mary is asking, how long did it take for our kid to get letters? Do you want to take a crack at that one, and then maybe I can add a few details?
Yeah, I'll just be real quick. I think that technically it can take up to 4 month experience, it can take a much shorter time. Some of it has to do with, does your letter have to be translated? We have an older child in Kenya who writes in English, and she sometimes receives our letters in as little as 2 weeks. So it's really fast. Other places, depending on where your child lives, it just takes longer for the letters to get there. On the slide you're seeing right now, that's Luz Maria again. She lives 5 hours from the Compassion office. So it takes a little bit longer for our letters to get that distance from the office to the center. So I would say on average about 2 months. So if you're sending out Christmas cards or you want something to get there, I would shoot for 2 months in advance.
Yes, yeah, well said. And that's been my experience too. We have kids that we sponsor all over the world, and like for instance, I know our little girl named Karen in the Philippines. It feels like we get letters from her all the time, and then we have a little boy in Ethiopia, and it feels like an age before we hear it. So there's a lot of variables, and I think probably one thing that's helpful for us in the United States to remember about letter writing is that probably within the United States and the developed world, mail is rather quick. But then once you get to the developed world, it has a few things kind of working against it. So that's why it slows it down. So yeah, thank you, Kim.
Yeah,
keep those questions coming, audience. And Kim, I'll let you keep going. And like I said before, if we are not able to answer any of these questions here on the webinar, we'll make sure we address it in the post-webinar email.
Okay, thanks, Ian. I would like to add one little thing to that that I did forget to mention earlier. As far as when you receive letters from your children, I do want to let you know that that is directly proportional to how often you write your child. If you write your child every month, you're going to get more letters from your children. If you do not write at all, your child will write you 2 letters during the year just to let you know how they're doing. But if you write regularly, your child will write you every other month. When you send a gift, you'll get an extra thank you letter. So you could be looking at 6 letters, 8 letters, 10 letters a year. But your child writes every 2 months. Most of the Compassion Centers are on that schedule. So my correspondence with my kids has been really regular lately. I can just about calculate when I'm going to receive a letter from one of my kids. So I would say just keep writing regularly, and pretty soon you'll see, excuse me, about every 2 months you should start getting letters from your children. So I'm going to move on because I still have a lot to cover, and I'm going to try to cover it really quickly. And this part is about, what do I say to my child? I know it can be so daunting to sit down in front of a blank piece of paper. It just can be. But I want to remind you that you have a powerful voice in these children's lives. So just say something. I actually received a letter just today from one of our children in India. Her name's Athira. Excuse me, all this talking. And she told me, dear sponsor, I really feel like God spoke to me through you. And I just thought, wow, that is such a powerful statement, that we have that kind of voice in our children's lives. So I think we should take advantage of that by writing often, speaking often, and speaking words of affirmation into our children's life. Excuse me again, gosh. All right, so I think the first thing that you need to do when you're writing to your sponsored child is to get personal with them. If you're like me, you want to know absolutely everything that you can know about your sponsored child. So I think we should assume that they want to know everything about you. They're going to be really curious. Who is this person from a really long way away that wants to know about me? So tell your sponsored child all about you and your family, birthdays, ages, all of that stuff. Something helpful that I found to do is to make a list of all of my interests, my hobbies, my talents. You could sit down and do that and have a letter a month for the whole year by just writing a letter about each one. Discuss your job. One of the letters that I got the most response about was when I wrote to my children about the job that my husband does, and they've all written back about it and said, wow, I'm so amazing that, you know, snow, he does this. When you do that, you're introducing your children to something new. There are a lot of jobs out there that they haven't heard about. So you're really expanding their horizons, talking about something maybe they haven't considered before. So definitely talk about what you do for a living. Also relate funny stories. I promise this can be very rewarding. You will definitely get some funny stories from your kids in return, and they're priceless. You really start to see the kids' personalities coming out when you do that. The last thing I really want to add and encourage you to do is to send photos. The kids love these. They love to see you. They love to see your family. They love to see your pets. You know, we have kids every time that ask, how's your cat doing? And I get to respond, well, my cat's doing well. I'm glad you like the photos. So they love that. Pictures of interesting places that you've been, pictures of things they've never seen before, like snow or like the ocean. These are treasured by your children. And you have to remember as well that your children don't have access to photos that often. So send them a picture of themselves so that they'll have that. That'll be a precious gift for your sponsored child and their family. All right, the next slide. I'm going to encourage you to get spiritual. The greatest poverty our children have is the need for Jesus. A sponsorship, sending our $38 a month per child, mediates a lot of barriers that these children have to coming to know the Lord. Poverty will tell a child, you know what, you were born, some of them even in a trash dump. You eat from the trash, you wear clothes from the trash, that means you're trash. It takes a lot to change that mentality in the life of a child. And we know those are just lies that the enemy tells a child. But when we sponsor a child and we send our $38, that's mediating a lot of that. We're providing food, we're providing health care, we're providing education and clothing. And their hearts start to become open to hearing about the love of God. No, they're not hearing anymore, God can't love me. If he loves me, why am I living like this? Instead, they're hearing, wow, maybe God really does see me. Maybe God really does hear my prayers. Maybe God really does care. And so we can step through that open door and really help introduce our children to Jesus. Share your testimony. When your children send you a prayer request, pray for it. I'm always humbled when I see in my children's letters that they say they're praying for me. That's truly humbling. I would also encourage you to share Bible stories. You know, I had one of my children say, I asked them, did they know the story of Daniel in the lion's den, and they said no. And so I thought, well, there's something to write about. They will now. Encourage them with passages of Scripture. Send memory verses and devotionals for your older children to help them in their walk with the Lord. All right, the next step is to get encouraging. This is what my husband calls gushing, and I say that because he loves to gush. He loves to write letters to our kids to tell them all these things. This is the great part. You get to tell them they're loved and they're special and they're valuable. They're intelligent. They're beautiful. They're gifted. You're speaking truth into their life. Every single child is unique and special. They're created by God. They have something in this life that only they can do. And as sponsors, we have that powerful voice to speak that to a child in a way that they start believing it. So definitely do that in your letters. The next slide, I'm going to encourage you to get educational with your children. For the most part, our children live in small communities. Some of them live in huge cities. That's definitely true. Their world is small. In the places I've been, a lot of them get where they're going by walking. So that's how big their world is. A lot of them don't have access to the internet. So we have a great opportunity to make their world big. Talking about the world, the natural world, talking facts about science and nature. One time I sent my kids pH strips where they They could go out and test different things in their environment, like put it on some pineapple or put it on soap or put it in their water just to see what the pH level was. So teaching them about science and things like that. Send them educational games like flashcards for multiplication tables and things like that. One thing I really recommend for everyone to send is a map, because that's when they really see how big the world is. Talk about where you live in comparison to where they live, so they can get an idea that the world is bigger than just where they live. You know, talk about famous people, famous places, all kinds of things that have happened in the world, and give them tools and ideas for exploring and understanding the world that they live in. All right, get conversational. I encourage you, when you receive a letter from your child, that you answer the correspondence promptly. Anytime your child asks a question, answer them. And anytime you want to ask a question, do that for both of these things. If you want to answer a question or ask a question, highlight your answer or highlight your question so that they'll be noticed. It just makes it a little bit easier for your child to realize that that's important and you want an answer to that. Also, say thank you when they write you a letter. Let them know that you've given them a really special gift when they write a letter to you. And always give a compliment. Say, I like the way that you phrased that sentence, or I was really touched by the Bible verse that you sent to me, or that picture was the most beautiful rainbow I have ever seen in my life. Give them a compliment. Make them feel special, and in doing that, you're recognizing the effort that they put into sending you a letter. And the last slide actually for this section is to celebrate. In a lot of countries, your child's birthday isn't celebrated. So that's really something special you can do as a sponsor, is send a birthday card. I was told by one of the Compassion graduates that only rich people in their country got birthday cards, so that when she received one, she felt really special. So celebrate important events in your child's life with cards, certificates, gifts, whether it's birthdays, holidays. I know our holidays and the holidays our children celebrate are not necessarily the same, but you can tell them about the holidays in our country. Also, important achievements like graduation or passing to the next grade. You can send a financial gift to your child for these important events through your My account at compassion.com. Each year you can send a family gift of up to $1,000, a child gift of up to $100, and a birthday gift of up to $100. So to recap here, do my letters really matter? I think if I could hear you talking right now, hopefully you would all say yes. Your letters are giving a child hope and encouragement in the midst of darkness and despair. A lot of these kids have hard lives. They work really hard. They suffer a lot of things. So when they get that letter, again, that's just an affirmation. God sees me. God loves me because he sends someone to encourage me. Your words are going to make your child feel valued. It might be the only time in their life they've heard that they're beautiful, that they're special, that they're talented, and even the only time they've ever heard, I love you. And remember that your letters build the relationship with your child. If you don't communicate, you're not going to have the relationship that you want. If you're interested in other ways to get involved, you can learn more about Compassion's ministry through advocacy, and I think Ian's going to touch on that in just a minute. You can also connect with other sponsors through social media. Compassion's on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, Our Compassion, and Twitter. In the post-webinar packet that you're going to get sent, I provided links for all of those so that you can connect directly there. You can also, if you're just totally pumped about letter writing, there's a way to grow your family without actually financially sponsoring more children. You can write to children whose sponsors are unable to do so. For example, if a large business sponsors maybe 100 children, they're not going to have time to write to all of those children. And believing that relationship is important, Compassion can open it up which for other people to write to their children. The picture you're seeing is actually one of the children that we had the blessing of corresponding with, and we met him twice. It was absolutely a treasure to get to be the relationship for him. That child that you correspond with will know you as their sponsor. So that's really cool. Call Compassion and get added to the list if you can commit to writing to additional children at least 3 times a year. Go visit. Go visit. If you get a chance, do it. It will be so encouraging to you. That's a great way to connect with your child, obviously. You can see me there with our beautiful sponsored daughter, Luz Maria, is such a blessing to you and a blessing to the child. Compassion offers a number of sponsor and advocate tours throughout the year to all kinds of countries, all the countries they work in, maybe not every year, every other year. You can also organize your own group or individual visit if you're going to be visiting your child's country, and you can do that online at compassion.com on the Get Involved link and click Tours and Visits. If you have more questions, I know after the webinar, if any questions have not been answered, we're going to make an effort to get to all of those. But check out the attachment that you're going to be sent after this webinar. It includes those templates that I told you that I'd be sending, ideas, and different links. And also, if you want to, I would love to have you find me on Facebook. I have a page called Kim's Compassion. It's not my personal page. Maybe we'll become friends, and later you might want to be my friend on Facebook. But you can go online to Kim's Compassion. You can just type that in the search box and it'll pop up. And I've kind of made a forum where you can ask questions and get ideas about letter writing. And we kind of encourage each other and recommend things there. So that's actually all that I have for right now. So I'm going to turn that back over to Ian. Thank you for being a great audience and listening to all these words.
Yes, thank you so much, Kim. I feel like my smile muscles are tired. I feel like I've been smiling between the pictures and the enthusiasm and all these great ideas. I feel like I've been smiling for a whole hour. So thank you for all that you've done and shared for us today. And in conclusion, I just wanted to point out one other thing, and I'm going to show my screen here for a moment for the audience. Like I had mentioned before, some of you were invited to come to this webinar by a family member or a friend who is part of Compassion Advocate Network. And Compassion Advocate Network is made up of a bunch of sponsors that just want to do more. They want to tell everyone they know about compassion. They want compassion to be a presence at their church or their business or their homeschool co-op or a lunch group for lunch at work, what have you. There are a lot of ways to be able to share how God is affording this unique compassion through Compassion International. So I wanted to point this out to you. This is compassion.com. If you go to compassion.com and click on the Get Involved tab and then go down to Volunteer Opportunities, click on that, and then it'll take you, oops, I moved a little too fast. You want to go to Get Involved, Volunteer Opportunities, click on that, and then go to Join the Network. And here you can learn all about what Compassion Advocate Network is about. At the core, it's a community of advocates, and we're here to help each other speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. So a couple of ways to describe the Advocate Network is that it's a community. So you're not doing this alone. You're not just out there by yourself sharing this compassion with your church and family and friends, but there's others like Kim who are doing the same. And then also we have a whole list of resources available to you. Anything from DVDs and videos to play at your church, training classes so that you can feel better equipped to share your advocacy, even advocacy coaching for those who might feel stuck in the advocacy, who want to move forward, or maybe you just feel like you've kind of tapped out all the other ways that you've had to share compassion. You want to kind of look for new ideas. All of that you can get through the Advocate Network. So what I'd recommend is to go to compassion.com, get involved, volunteer, and then click on Join the Network, and then take a look at that. And if you're interested, go ahead and fill out one of the profiles, and we can come alongside you in this really unique way of sharing compassion. So with that, we'll call it a night. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. We hope that this hour was beneficial to you, and we're really grateful for your help in releasing children from poverty in Jesus' name. Have a great evening.